very excited to do this in person. I'm actually very excited to meet you. As I mentioned, it's like I've known of your work for 20 plus years.
Wow. So, I'm the one who's honored that you're here
during
a pandemic to do an
happy.
interview, so thank you.
Good. But now, first question I always have is, we're an alumni magazine, so tell me about your UGA experience.
I had the best time at the University of Georgia, and obviously got a really good education because I'm doing exactly what I dreamed I would be doing. But I tell my children now, because I have one who's a freshman in college and one who's a junior in high school and looking and really likes Georgia and looking at where she wants to go, that your college experience can be 4 of the best years of your life if you pick the right place and you pick a place that works for you. So I originally decided on Georgia to apply there for 2 reasons. Because they had a good journalism school, it was reputable, and I knew I wanted to be a journalist. And because my baton teacher in Greenville, South Carolina, was the featured twirler, or was one of the twirlers at the University of Georgia back in her day, and she suggested that I try out for the line, and I did, and made the majorette line. So it just seemed like the perfect place to me to go. I would be involved in a group already with the band, and it had a reputation for turning out journalists that were successful, and it just fit. So the first few years just went by in a blur because I was so active with the band, and we got to travel. We were part of the football team, and you don't really get into J school until like in later years anyway. But I did bring something for you that I could share if you want. I could take a picture of it, send it to you. I still have, David Hasinski was my professor.
Okay. Yep, I knew Professor Hasinski.
And I still have the very first letter that he sent me when I was out of school and I was trying to get my first job in business. And he took the time to write a detailed letter of what he thought was good on the tape and what he thought was bad. I mean, he was always the professor and always trying to make you improve. So I still keep that letter, and I have a picture of him because he was such a huge influence on me. I really loved learning from him. I loved the Grady College of Journalism. I still have friends that I talked to from back there. And I felt I had a job before I graduated. I mean, I was so well prepared, and apparently that resume tape was good. And I also made sure that I did the things I needed to that Georgia offered. Like I worked at the Red and Black. I worked at the TV station there that I believe was a public TV station at the time. I'm not sure if it's still there. And I worked radio. Most of those jobs I did for free.
Oh yes, I did the
but
same.
It was so nice that the opportunity was there to actually, learn in the business. I did an internship while I was in college in Washington, D.C. But I had fun. I was a Zeta Tau Alpha, so I was a member of a sorority at Georgia. I just remember there being endless opportunities to explore who you are and grow as a person and have a good time. I told you my best friend from college still lives in Athens, and with their nice white front porch that when we go to visit, we'll sit out on the porch and listen to the band play, talk about, because they practice right down the street from her. We've done homecoming together. I'll go back and twirl sometimes. I wouldn't come back as often or have such fond memories if it wasn't such a good place for me. Does that make sense? Such a wonderful place for me at that time in my life. And I joke around when people say, if you could go back to any time in your life, what would it be? I always go, I'd go back to college. Are you kidding? I'd go back to Georgia and I'd live those 4 years again because, I'm still technically on mommy and daddy's dime, right? Although I did work. You're having a blast and you're learning about what you want to do the rest of your life. That's just a good time.
It's great to hear you say that. I'd like to say my favorite time was my 2 years at UGA. I went to grad school there because it was like I was in this in-between where I was old enough to understand what it was like to be an adult, but I didn't necessarily have to be. And going to Grady, and I guess you experience this too, it's like you make these lifelong friends. I mean, I have a bunch of friends who I still keep in touch with all the time. I mean, one of my friends who I met in grad school, he now lives in Texas. His daughter's a freshman. So nice. I've been able to kind of adopt her, which is very, very exciting. And I can show her what it's like to be at UGA.
It's such a pretty town. I just remember laying out on the grass between classes, near the arches, and loved the music scene, and the Odyssey, and it's right across the street. It was the Odyssey.
Yeah, Odyssey's gone.
Right, the Georgia, is it the Georgia
Theater.
Yeah, the Georgia Theater. So, going to see Driving and Crying in the B-52. So I went to school when a lot of that music was raging, and 40 Watt Club was big, and REM, and Athens is kind of known for that music explosion during that time. And so I got to experience all of that too. I can't not say, I can't leave out the fact that I did get a good education.
Yes.
I got a great education. I got, like I said, I had a job before I even graduated. I've never been unemployed. And I'm doing exactly what it is I wanted to do and have been for all my adult life. And I owe that to the education that I got at Georgia.
And part of the experience of being a UGA alumna and alumnus is the town of Athens, and it's something it's integral, and it's something that all of our alumni can immediately connect with, no matter what part of the university you went to. Everybody experienced that. It's something that I like to write about.
Yes. It would be a character in one of my books one day.
Hey, it's like if you need a study, if you need like advanced scouting of places that are in Athens, I'm happy to help. And again, that's an internship. So.
In fact, one of my friends who I kept in touch with was in the band and in TV, but she's not anymore. She's writing her first book. And so she's kind of turned to me, Catherine Caldwell, for a little help. And it's set in Athens. So
really?
It's kind of fun to read about it. Yeah, it's she goes back in time and anyway, it's set in Athens. So for me, it's fun because I recognize some of the places that she takes us to.
Like I came in a little bit after. I was there when the music scene was Dave Matthews Band, right, and the Blowfish.
Which is still pretty good.
Every other weekend, it was one of those bands playing the Georgia Theater.
I know.
And it was, and then it just hit gigs right after I graduated.
You were there when?
Exactly. Okay, so you had a couple of jobs in TV right after you graduated, but then your big break came in '95, I guess, and it's here in Tampa, where you started the news organization.
Yes, that was such a great experience.
Channel 28.
It's kind of interesting how that decision came about. So I was in Orlando, and my agent at the time, I told him I want to either go to Los Angeles or New York. So I did get a job offer at KCBS in Los Angeles, and I went out there and interviewed. They offered me a job, but I also got offered a job at a startup here in Tampa under the leadership of a man named Bob Jordan. And I knew who Bob Jordan was because he was the dominant news director of WFTV in Orlando, where I just worked, and he just was number one by miles, not even close. And so he had a very good reputation. So he had been out in LA. If I could just backtrack real quick, this is kind of interesting. When I went to LA to interview for one job, he was the news director at KCBS at the time. And I interviewed on the day that they found Nicole Brown Smith's body.
Oh my God.
So it was not a great day to interview for a job. And I remember walking into his office and he said to me, okay, you've seen the news, you know how busy it is. I don't have time to really interview you. Anybody can do a resume tape. It's a best of tape. Send me your work for every day for the next 5 days. Then I'll tell you whether you're good or not.
Wow.
Thanks for coming by. That was the interview. And shaking, I walk out, but I did what he said. Well, I didn't hear from him until like 6 months later. He was let go at KCBS and hired in Orlando, hired here in Tampa to do the startup here in Tampa. And he said, I loved your work. I just couldn't hire you because I had things going on, obviously. Yeah. But I'm doing this startup. Would you like to come work for me in Tampa? And so I took the job. It was amazing to be part of a group from the ground up, starting it from the ground up. And I'm trying to think of the people that I worked with. In Orlando, I worked with Shepard Smith and Trace Gallagher, who went on to for Fox, the network. But over here, I worked with Paul Conrad. He's now at WGN. Kyle Praska is in Los Angeles. And so some of the people that were hired for that startup here in Tampa went on to do really big things. Alina Cho is now working for CBS This Morning. I chose to stay. Because number one, I loved Tampa. Number two, I met my husband on the story, and his whole family's here, and they're Cuban American, and family is a very important thing. And I do believe in this business. You either make a decision, you go big, Los Angeles, New York, or you find a city that you like and you stay. and you build equity in the city, and you get to know the people, and you do good things, and you build a platform, and you build a life, and you put roots in the ground. And that's what I decided to do at Tampa.
Two-part question. Starting up a news organization in a market like Tampa, which is kind of characterized by people becoming active and staying for 30 years.
Yes.
Tell me about how, was that intimidating? And then, you're new to the community. One of the big, really unwritten jobs of a news anchor is to be a community member, a community leader. How did you do that?
All right, so in the beginning, we had a slogan called "Working Hard to Be Your Favorite." That was our slogan, and we knew that we were up against some juggernauts. Channel 8 was number 1 at the time, the NBC station. Fox was also doing well. We knew, but I was young. I was young, and I didn't really care. I was out having a good time. I was out doing stories that mattered to me. I was working for who I thought was a genius. I mean, I really thought Bob Jordan was the man, and so that didn't really bother me. The whole ratings thing didn't really bother me. I did learn about the importance of getting out to the community when I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and that happened in 2001, 2011. Yes, 2011. So many years later. For most of my first years at ABC, and I was there 20 years, I was just a beat reporter. I was going out on the street, and that's a good way to get to know your community. I mean, you're out on the street every day talking to people. And then I became a medical reporter, and then I got diagnosed with breast cancer. So I took what was a negative thing and turned it into a positive thing. I was actually, before that, involved in the American Cancer Society because my mom had breast cancer. So I saw the importance of that organization and how it helped her. And so I used my platform as a news reporter at ABC to do things for the American Cancer Society, outreach to recovery, fashion shows, anything they asked me to do, I would do. And then when I was diagnosed, I really took a step out to the community. We started the Polk County Susan G. Komen walk over there at ABC. We began to do the Making Strides walk, and I brought it with me when I came to Fox. And last year, or the year before, last year, there was no pandemic. We had like almost 25,000 people out there. So I guess I kind of became known as a medical reporter and a breast cancer survivor. So I guess I became known in the community as an advocate for women's health. And I do a shoot for the cure every year. And I like that because it gets men involved in the cause. And over the years, they've raised like $60,000, and they allow me to donate it in my name to the place where I was diagnosed to pay for mammograms for uninsured women, or underinsured women. So I'm not at a point where I can just stroke a check for 60 grand,
Right.
but I do feel like I've been able to give back to the community that way.
Is it something that, there's pre-diagnosis and post-diagnosis? Did you experience a sea change, not just in how you approach your job, but how you live your life?
Yes, I let things slide off my back now. I don't, it's not that I'm not as ambitious, but happiness comes first to me now. Family comes first, and I'm just kind of grateful for every day. And my breast cancer diagnosis was part of the reason I left ABC and moved to Fox. It was just, I was unhappy at the time, and I was affecting my physical health and my mental health. And I've always kind of been one of these people that says, if you're not happy in your job, don't make everybody else miserable. Don't complain about it. Do something about it. So I put a plan into place and executed it, and walked across the street to Fox, and cannot be happier. They have a philosophy there that they want their people to stay forever. They embraced my community involvement. American Cancer Society came over to shoot for a cure. All these big organizations that I was doing things for at ABC followed me to Fox, and Fox got behind it. And so I really feel like I'm still able to continue my advocacy, but I don't feel any of the stress. When I walked into that newsroom, and it could be that they're the number one station here, it's a dominant number one, but I think it's also management's so good. The news director started there as a weekend producer, and he's been there over 30 years. So he's been the boss there for 10. So there's just stability. And but that first day I walked in, I said to him, what is it? I replaced a woman that was there 25 years and alleged in the community. Denise White. And so I walked into his office and I said, what is it you want me to do? What are you looking for from me? And he looked up from his desk. His name's John Hoffman, and he said, I just want you to be you. We hired you because we like you. It was like this weight was lifted off my shoulder. There's no consultant telling me how to dress, what to say, who I need to be. They just wanted me to be me, and I'm like, well, how can I fail at being me? And now not everybody will like me because that's just human nature.
Right.
Not everybody likes you, but you can't fail at being yourself. If you have been more comfortable on that set than I was for 20 years over at ABC, and then the same day, the general manager, Jeff, walks down and says to me, I don't know what they did over at ABC, but we don't worry about the ratings every day. I don't want you worrying about the ratings. If you want to look at them, fine, but don't worry about them. John and I will worry about them. It's our job. If we need to change something or tweak something, we'll let you know. You just go do you and don't worry about it. And that's what I've been doing for the past 5 years. And it's just been magical because I feel like what people love about Fox is that we're just being ourselves. And we're given the opportunity to just be ourselves. Now, I could go and say, it's really important to me to go out and do a story on this upcoming charity event. I believe in it. Grab a photographer, we're going to do it. You know, Mark Wilson's believes in the military. He does a lot of things with the military. Cynthia Smoot, who's my colleague at 5, is an animal advocate. And she does stories all the time for animals. So I think there's authenticity that was not there at some of the other stations I worked for. Does that make sense?
No, totally.
They're embracing who we are and allowing us to be that in the community.
It's something that I am able to bring to my job. It's like because I meet with the president of the university on a quarterly basis. He signs off on all the work that we do, but I can pitch a variety of different stories, and generally he's good with them.
He trusts your opinion.
Yes,
you're skilled. You know what you're doing.
It's a little scary, but it's also one of the things where I can move the magazine into certain areas, and also, and I try to be very cognizant, as maybe you do too, it's like of my own interests and thoughts and biases, so I have to account for that. Since I started the magazine, there have been a lot of journalism grads who've been profiled because that's what I like.
Right.
So I have to make sure to keep an eye on it. That's like, okay, are we going to do a maximum of 2 Brady grads?
Right. I'm glad to hear you say that because I do think as a journalist, we're supposed to be unbiased, but I also do think we have to look out for diversity.
Right.
And anything else, fairness. Being correct. Can you hand me my drink?
Oh, yeah.
Thanks. I do think that is part of our job. You know, especially today, especially with the narrative that's going on in our country. If you're going to go out and get man on the street interviews, make sure it's representative of your community. And if that means you have to drive to another community to get some of those sounds, then do that. Because you know your community is not made up of just one race and gender.
Right.
It's a melting pot. And so I do think that's how journalists can kind of help out with the narrative that's going on today. Just be responsible. Not only does your story need to be right, it needs to be fair and diverse, and it needs to be representative of your community and all the voices.
And we talked very briefly at the beginning about the changes in your job since the pandemic.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about that, and also moving forward once this is over.
So there were 2 weeks in March that I really felt like I was holding my breath every day. And I watched my news director, who, again, I think is just a man. Like, I have so much respect for him. I just saw it in his eyes, the intensity of what was happening. And I remember sitting on the set, watching them build that hospital in China, going, wow, that's a big deal. And then, like, 2 weeks later, it's here. It happened that fast. And the mandate came down from corporate, you got to get people out of the building. And we were all very nervous about it. I mean, how do you anchor the news from your living room? How am I going to see what's going on if the president is throwing to a press conference or holding a press conference? How am I going to throw to that? And my hours are 10 in the morning till 6 in the evening, so I'm the bridge. I call myself the bridge from the Good Day crew, the morning show, which is 6 hours long, and then the evening crew that comes in around 3 o'clock and they do news till midnight. So I'm the only one there during the day, and I just remember feeling the anxiety. I I knew the press conferences from DeSantis, the governor, from the president would all be during my shift. The CDC, all of that would be during my shift. And I got to say, for the first time in a decade, I was a little scared because I just didn't know. I felt the responsibility of getting the information to the scared people out in the public because we were all scared. Let's call it what it is. It was life-changing. And I knew what we were doing as a newsroom was very important. Our ratings shot up. People were going home. People were relying on us for information. Watched people trickle out of the newsroom and equipment go home, and I watched all the adjustments people were making, and I made my case to my news director to stay in the building, which was also risky, right? You don't want to bring COVID into the building. You don't want to be that person, but I just felt like I needed to be in the newsroom and sitting on the set where I could watch the White House. Because when they give you a 2-minute warning, it doesn't mean it's 2 minutes. It could be 3, it could be 5, it could be 30 seconds. I've had all of those things happen to me. And so I just needed to be in a situation where I could see what was going on because I was the voice throwing all of that. And, it did happen. There were times when DeSantis said he was going to go on at 11, and he was 3 minutes early. And there were times the president said he was going to go on at 10:30, and it was 11:30. So I spent a lot of time sitting on the set, watching news conferences and throwing to them in the first part of the pandemic. But it was amazing that all of my friends took to the new technology, the Zoom, the doing your anchoring from home, the teleprompter that shows up in your iPhone now, and all those things. We made the adjustments, and it worked, and it worked quickly. And I think it's changed the way we do business for good. Like, I don't know that reporters and photographers will ever come back into the newsroom for the big, raucous newsroom meetings that I remember. Maybe once the vaccine is out. But it changed things pretty significantly and pretty.
We've been working remotely since March. Right? We were totally out for several months, but now we're doing split shifts. I mean, there are people who work for the magazine that I haven't seen in person since March. So it is extremely difficult.
When I see people, sometimes they'll come by to pick equipment up, and they're not allowed in the building. So I'm walking through the garage, and I see them. I'm like, stop, talk to me. Like, I just want the human connection, So they have slowly started moving people back in. Like, my co-anchor at 5 is in the green room. And my co-anchor at 4 is in Studio B. So I can yell and we can talk, or I can walk to the door or text. So I feel their presence more, which is good, but it's still not the way it was.
Yeah. I mean, the Atlanta stations are doing, everybody's in a room, but they're distant, you can tell. One of the things I'm wondering is, I was a sports reporter after I graduated. I actually got to work for the Times in Tampa Bureau for a little while.
Nice.
Lots of high school sports.
Right.
Loved the job, made no money, but it was fun.
Right.
But that sort of in-person reporting at that level, so I hope that comes back, and I hope that broadcasters come back, because now people cover games from their living room. That's not the way to do it, but will networks cut their budgets so that they start with it.
But it did make me realize again how important local news is.
Yes.
It is very important. And we had a record hurricane season during 2020. We had an election like we've never seen during 2020. We had protests right outside of Fox after George Floyd was killed. So we've seen all of these things in 2020. It's really been an unprecedented year. And it has just reminded me the importance of your local news station. And not only getting the information right, like I said, being diverse and being fair, but also I'm glad I stayed in Tampa and kind of grew up here and put roots down, because I do think people trust me more. They know me. And I'll get people who say that to me on the streets like you did. I grew up watching you, and I get that a lot. I remember when you were pregnant. I remember when you were diagnosed with breast cancer. I cried with you. I remember when you lost your mother. I remember, most of the time it's personal things I remember, but I literally have grown up on TV here. And so when, as has Paul Delgado and Kelly Ring and Mark Wilson and all the people at Fox, so when the shit hits the fan, who do you want to turn to? You want to turn to a trusted friend. And I really do feel like we are trusted friends, and it's been gratifying to be able to be on the air and to help the community that I love, and I truly do love the community, get through this crazy year. And for a while I kept thinking, oh, I can't. What, another storm? We're in the Greek alphabet? What world are we living in this year? What is going on? You know, it's just been a crazy year. And I released a book too.
I know.
I did all of that. A medical thriller.
Thank you for
During a medical thriller.
Thank you for mentioning that, because that was my next question. All the while you have this day job, you kind of have this little side project. And after I read an interview you had done, I think it was Creative Loafing, I think as well, that
Right.
you started kind of writing a long time ago.
Oh, yes.
So tell me about when you started.
You know, I love writing. I'm a writer. If I had to describe my professional self in one word, it would be storyteller. I'm a storyteller. I tell people stories. And for Fox 13, I tell real stories. For Untitled Publishing, I make them up. But I'm still telling stories. And I always wanted to be a fiction writer. It took me a while to realize that just because I was a journalist, it didn't mean I was a good fiction writer. So I had to learn the skills. It took me 10 years before my first book got published, almost. I joined the Romance Writers of America and started going to conferences and just learning the skills of fiction writing. And I found along the way that I love writers. I love writers. I love the eclectic group of people that they are. I could have a friend that teaches Catholic high school and writes erotica, and another friend that writes paranormal, and she's not a witch. What are they? A Wiccan, right? So, I mean, these are people that I probably never normally would run into in my day job or my day life, but I do because we have one thing in common: we write fiction, and I just love the diversity of that. I love my writers' coven is what we call each other, my writers' group, and so because of that, I think I kept at it, even though in the beginning you're not making any money, and it's very, very, very hard to get published. It's more difficult to get published than it was to get a job on TV. You get rejected over and over again. If you don't have a thick skin, you'll give up because you will get rejected hundreds of times. So I guess what I write fiction because it's my passion. I love it. I love to do it. I tried to quit a couple of times when I was raising my family, and my kids would complain about the computer. And, my husband would be like, "Well, you're not making as much money as TV, so focus on TV," and all of that would take me away from it. And I just found myself going back to the computer over and over again to start telling another story. And so now everybody's finally given up. They're just like, well, she writes fiction. We're just gonna let her. Even my boss at Fox 13 just kind of says, all right. Because, it's just something I love to do so much. If it never makes me rich and famous, I never get the movie done, I don't care. I do it because I love it.
I'm not taking it.
Sure.
No, it's gonna be good.
Yeah.
One of the challenges of writing romantic fiction, it's a very specific genre.
It is. My next book, I think, is going to be just a thriller. I'm going to get out of the romantic fiction. I think there's a fine line when you're writing romantic fiction. Everybody skims through, I guess, what they call the sex scenes because they're embarrassing, whatever. So I don't know that I don't write erotica. I don't write anything too sexy. What I write is, I'd say, like going to a James Bond movie. So there's going to be a sexy love interest, and there's going to be a mystery, and there's going to be car chases and gunshots and interesting characters, and someone's going to fall in love, and there probably is going to be a behind the doors. There'll be a sexy moment leading up to the behind the doors sex scene.
Yes.
So that's kind of what I write. I chose romantic because when I was younger, maybe not as beat up in life, I don't know. I just loved love. I mean, I just love love, and I love the act of falling in love. I married the love of my life that I met on a story, and he has actually helped me with this book, Cube Undercover. Helped me as like the main character. So it's not like I'm looking for love anymore. I kind of live vicariously through my characters now. I mean, who doesn't love that moment when you realize the person you hated just said something that's brilliant and kind of made your stomach flutter because of it? Or you catch that person looking at you in that way that you know they think you're beautiful or attractive, or there's something about you they admire. And you just get filled with that warmth that you don't get every day. That whole act of falling in love is fun. I mean, let's face it, the endorphins in our head start firing off and we feel good. So that's the romantic fiction. I love the whole act of falling in love. But I'm also an adrenaline junkie. I've jumped out of planes, and I probably do a good car chase and try to jump over that and get into the yacht and take off. I mean, I'm an adventure girl. I loved Indiana Jones and James Bond and all of those movies. So that's why the thriller. Lately, I've gotten into kind of darker psychological thrillers. I don't know why 2020 has messed with all of us.
Yeah, I think everybody is.
So, and my last book was a medical thriller, which I wrote before the pandemic and before 2020. I spent 10 years as a medical reporter, so I had really good connections, and I knew how a hospital worked, and I knew how the health department worked, and I wanted to use that as a backdrop. And then just so happens they wanted to release the book in May of 2020. And I was really freaked out about that at first because I thought nobody's going to want to read about a medical thriller. They're living it, like they just don't want to read it. But it did well. My publisher for Untitled now wants me to write a thriller with a Cuba backdrop. So I think it's going to be a serial killer thriller. So it'll be different from these books. It will be a flat out mystery thriller.
Have you started it yet, or are you just kind of concepting?
I'm concepting, and the good thing about now, as before, when I sold these 3 books, I had to write the book first and then try to sell it. Now I'm writing a proposal, so I'm writing the proposal and submitting it, and they will tell me and pay me to write the book before I start writing it.
Okay.
So I've kind of advanced to that stage, which is nice.
But it took you 3 years, or 3 books, about 6
To get
years
to that,
after you
yeah.
get to this?
To get to the publisher trusting me enough, they know I can write a book.
Sure, no.
I wanted to bring you questions. Can I turn you this way? Thank you so much.
They know I can deliver.
Yep.
They like my style. They like my writing. So now I just have to come up with 7 figures and hit the New York Times bestseller list. So I think she has figured out the market and a formula. And it's not that I'm writing to sell the book and make $1 million, because I told you I'm not. I'm writing because I love it. But I do think once the doors open, more people will find you. And they'll read all your books, and they'll read your backlist, and you get a movie made, and then all of a sudden, it's much easier to get that book published because you have a track record. And that would be fun. Who doesn't want to have a movie made of their book? So I guess maybe that's the next goal.
Now, how did you pick your pen name?
Good question. So my mom's maiden name is Bond. My uncle was James Bond, but not the movie hero.
Not
He
the
was
actual one, darn it.
Yeah, he was a law professor at Wake Forest and then up in Seattle, so he was a professor. But I started thinking, well, if I'm going to write thrillers, I want people to know what they're getting from me as a storyteller. So when Linda Hurtado tells a story, it's true, it's factual, it's about real people. When Linda Bond tells a story, it's fiction. It's not true, even though you might think it is, it's made up, right? So that's why I tell stories under 2 different names. I thought it was important to clarify that. And Bond, because I write thrillers, people will automatically associate that with James Bond, so they know what they're getting. And it's a shout out to my mom's maiden name, so it all kind of worked.
I was talking with Morgan before you came out, and we're talking about the challenges of promoting this book
Yes.
over the last few months. I mean, is that frustrating, or is it, do you kind of understand, and you're actually just finding new ways to connect with people?
Well, it is frustrating, but again, after the breast cancer, and I just am so happy to be alive and healthy at this point in this year that I'm not sweating it. I was nervous about having in-person book launch. I was nervous about that. God forbid I didn't want anybody to get sick. So as part of like our party favors, Morgan and I came up with the idea of Linda Bond face masks. We handed them out at the door. Linda Bond hand sanitizer. What else did we have? So the swag was really pandemic based and safety based, and also it was a medical thriller. So
It shows a little bit of a sense of humor.
and it was great. Got to launch the book, and I'm pleased. I'm pleased with it. But with publishing, it's kind of like TV. You're only as good as your last live shot. So in publishing, you're only as good as the book you have coming out. So we are moving on to the next book, and we're trying to sell that, in the hopes that when you do sell the next book, people will like it and buy your backlist. So your books that you've written always live on. The next time you have a new book come out, when people like you, they'll buy your backlist. We still are actively promoting. We have a newsletter that comes out every week, and my newsletter, I pride it on being different. Morgan and I came up with this idea instead of buy my book, buy my book, buy my book. I mean, it's always there on the end. We're like, help me write my next book. So we have about 1,500 followers, maybe a little bit more, and really good open rate, and click rate, because I think I'm not asking people to buy, I'm asking them to help. They've helped me with my blurb for the next book, the first line. The next newsletter that's coming out will be the opening paragraph. One is written in first person, which is I, me, and then the other one is written in third person. And so far, the Linda Bond girls,
Yeah.
I'll tell you about the Linda Bond girls, they like it in third person, which is what these books are in third person. So what I am trying to do is engage my readership in the process of writing, and if they're engaged in helping me write this next book, when the book comes out, they're going to buy it because they helped, and they're gonna want to see which opening line did I go with, which opening paragraph, what twist and turn, and I just find it an engaging way to engage with your audience instead of just buy my book, I'll send you some swag that's old, So they're going to help me write my next book. They already are, and they're enjoying it. I think that's why they click open.
Oh yeah, we get so many responses from it.
LindaBond.com is where you can join the newsletter.
We will have links to that in the electronic version of this piece.
I have a very select group called the Bond Girls, and the Bond Girls are made up of just people that I know and trust, or people that have edited my work in the past, beta readers. So I may not know them personally, but I trust them. Because I want to be able to put things out first there. So if it sucks, it's okay. Yeah, and these are people that don't suck up to me. They tell me the truth. Don't really like that. This works better. Don't like that character. I didn't have people say she's a bitch. So they're truthful, and I don't think it takes a village to write a good book. You don't get anywhere without an understanding of what your readers like and don't like. So everything I do goes to the Bond Girls first, then it'll go to the newsletter, and then it goes to social media. So that's kind of how we're working it right now.
And how much of you is in your heroines? I mean, they're all news reporters, so it's
Right. Probably a little bit I was a medical reporter for 10 years, so the main character of Flatline drew a lot on that. I met my husband on a story going to Cuba when the Pope invited John Paul II. His family was one of many families that went back for the first time in 30 years, and I interviewed his mom and dad, and I fell in love with Cuba. I just fell in love with that country and the people and the man. And so I had an agent once tell me when I submitted the book before Untitled published it, it doesn't sound like a Latin man, you're a main character. I said, really? Well, I have a Latin man right in my own house. And so when we were painting the house, I would follow him room to room and read the dialogue. So he helped me change the dialogue and the mannerisms. So there's more of my husband in Cuba undercover than me. And Alive in 5, the main reporter had panic attacks, and believe it or not, there was a period in my career in TV when I was suffering from anxiety and panic attacks. And that's not really good when part of your job is live on TV. So I had to learn how to conquer that. And so the main character in Alive and balance that with this whole adrenaline junkie personality of mine. Hard to be an adrenaline junkie when all of a sudden you're suffering from anxiety. So that character has to deal with that in the book. So there are little things that I take from my real life, but the story itself, the things that have happened, are fiction.
Okay. And then last question is a UGA question. You mentioned earlier, how often do you get back to campus? And then also, how do you try to stay involved?
Well, we like to go to at least one game a year. I wish I could do more. Last year we went to the Georgia-Florida game in Jacksonville. It was amazing.
That was a good one.
That was a good
This
game.
past one didn't actually have
I
that.
agree. I'm glad we went to the one where we won.
Yeah.
I love this year.
And I like to go back to visit my friend, so if I could get back once a year, I would like to get back more. I'm hoping that my youngest daughter goes there maybe, so I'll have an excuse to go more often. In terms of getting involved, social media helps a lot. I keep up with my friends from school through social media. But I like the mentor program that they started up recently, and I'd like to mentor students that are in school currently and help them, or recently out. They also have a book club now, an alumni book club, so I'd like to help with that, either as the news anchor interviewing an author, or as an author being interviewed by someone. Either way, I think these are really important ways to give back. And then, eventually when I get that movie deal, I'd like to write a big fat check, because I do believe in giving back. I mean, I do believe it's important to give back to the university that was the foundation of your success, and the lockbox of so many great memories.
Is there anything else you would like to talk about, or anything I've missed? I didn't talk about family very much.
Right.
I wasn't sure how much room I would have, actually. And I know that you have talked about your family quite a bit.
Yeah, it's nice. I brought them back to Georgia, and back in the day when I was touring at homecoming, my kids got to, go between the hedges and watch me twirl and meet Uga, and so I've introduced Athens and the University of Georgia to them, which is kind of why I think my youngest daughter wants to go there. I think she gets the whole vibe of Athens, that it's very welcoming, very tolerant, accepting. She's my hippie child. She's more the one that I think would get into the music scene of Athens, and she is either going to be a psychiatrist or a professor.
Okay.
And so I really hope she goes there. I think it would be a great school for her. But yeah, I just I have nothing but good things to say about my experience. I really don't have anything negative to say about any of the time I was at Georgia. It was just fantastic.
When did you come back for homecoming that year?
What year when I brought the kids? They were younger. It was when they were exchanging one of the others. I have to look it up, but I can send you pictures if you want of them on the field with me and twirling during halftime as an adult.
Yes, no, that was great.
And I think I have a picture of me with Harry Dog too. I can send. I mean, I'll just send to someone. You can use whichever ones you want.
I got to meet Harry Dog, and then I got to meet Harry Dog without the mask. I didn't need to see that. I don't want to know.
You want him just to be Harry Dog.
Yes, I don't want to know.
The fantasy,
Maybe like a junior business major. I don't want to know that.
Yeah, I'm envious of you living in Athens, though. I think, when I retire, that would be. I have such a great job and such a privilege and a platform to use right now. I just can't walk away from it.
It's so beautiful. I live in the Homewood Hills section, which is off of Jefferson Highway, right after you pass the loop. And obviously, it's not what it normally is now, but once it reopens, right? I love it. The restaurant scene is tremendous.
Yes.
And one thing I tell, we weren't this way when I was in school, but a lot of Caribbean and Latin American restaurants are some of the best ones that we have.
I'm going to try that next time. When I was in college, I was living on, margaritas and free chips and dip. So I wasn't a foodie back then because I couldn't afford it.
I ate at Pepino's, and I would take 2 pieces of pizza with 1 topping each, and I'd fold them over because it was like 25 cents cheaper than getting 2.
So my pizza place was Rocky's.
Okay, yeah.
So I was
and it was for many
Rocky's,
people.
Yeah.
Yeah, Rocky's is gone, sadly. Pepino's moved down on South Village.
Right.
But it's still there.
Yeah, it contributed. Oh, and the taco stand. Those 2 contributed to my freshman 15, which I clearly had to lose to continue to be a major one.
Taco stand closed this summer.
Oh, you're
downtown
kidding.
One. I was mortified.
I love the taco stand.
Even after I was working, because our office is on Coney Street.
Right.
I'd sidewalk to taco stand.
Oh,
The one that is on Millage and Prince, that one's still there.
okay, good. That's the one we would go to.
Yep, that one's still there, but the downtown one closed.
Because that's like very close to where my best friend lives. So whenever we go to visit her, we always stop. And my kids, the enormity of the burritos, they were just, it was crazy. And the cheese and the dip, it's just different. I don't know, it's just different.
My coworkers would make fun of me because I would eat taco stand once a week.
Right?
Because they were much more sophisticated than me. I mean, just now. But,
Yeah. Okay, now you know where I was eating in college. But I'm at the point now where I would appreciate a much better dinner.
There's a great Peruvian restaurant like down the street
good.
from my house, and there's a Dominican restaurant which is in the Bottle Works district in John Prince, and an Argentinian place. I mean, it's.
Well, next
really
time I come to
remarkable.
town, I'm going to look you up. You can come get us out. You can be our guide.
I would be happy to do that. But yes, is there anything else that you'd like to cover?
No, I think we pretty much covered anything. Can you think of anything more?
I feel like that's.
Yeah, I'm really, honored that you're here and flattered that you feel like I've accomplished anything to write about. And I owe my success a large part of it to the University of Georgia. So.
Good. No, it's like it is my pleasure to be here, and it's this is one of those where it's like, all right, we're going to write this story because I say it's important, and it's like sailed through.
Well, I'm glad they said yes.
No, this has been a great pleasure.
Great.
In mine, and the books are for my partner Stephanie.
Oh,
they're going
good.
to be Christmas presents.
Oh, excellent. Well,
And
I
if you
brought
can
a couple
sign
of them.
them
They're
all.
all absolutely. You can take
That'd
these
be
three.
wonderful.
I just brought these to kind of show you how,
This is a
the
different
life of a
cover.
book.